A lot of people ask me when picking a novel protein source, can they just pick that up at the local grocery store or the pet food store? And I used to say, well, maybe it might be okay because they do have some novel protein sources. They have Natural Balance as a company, happens to have some novel proteins like bison, venison, and white fish. There's some Nature's Variety has a couple of diets that are novel in their protein source. There's a number of them out there. One of the problems that we run into, however, and there was a nice analysis looking at this, is that our over-the-counter diets, they are run typically on an individual line, and quite often multiple different ingredients are run on that same line. They may have lamb running through on their line first, and then it's followed by the duck. And what can happen is that lamb can actually cross-contaminate the duck, especially if the lines aren't cleaned, if there's no analysis that's done on the food, like they're not checking to see if there's abnormal protein content in there. A fingerprint analysis, similar, and they use different studies like PCR, polymerase chain reaction, basically checking for proteins that are outside of the normal. They use ELISA testing to make sure that basically there's no specific proteins that shouldn't be in the diet. Not a lot of the over-the-counter diets do this. The manufacturers have to keep their costs down, and so they basically eliminate this as a step. So there have been multiple studies that have been done that have looked to see if there's cross-contamination of these diets with different proteins. And indeed, there were soy and non-soy containing diets. There was a venison and a duck-based diet. So there's a multitude of studies that actually look at this and have documented the fact that commercially prepared diets can definitely be cross-contaminated with foods and proteins that shouldn't be in that diet. So that's why I tend to use the veterinary-based diets. All our veterinary diets have been analyzed. They double check and make sure that there's no proteins. They've got this fingerprint for that particular diet. And if there's a blip of a protein that comes outside of that fingerprint, then basically that diet gets yanked off the market before it gets introduced to our pets. So for me, if I have to work on a dietary restriction, the first diet that I go for is a veterinary-based diet. And then if the owner during the dietary challenge wants to try an over-the-counter diet, they're welcome to do so. I've actually found that some pets that have been on a novel protein source diet and found the equivalent over the counter actually ended up having some adverse reactions to those. So those owners came back to the veterinary-based diet because most likely there was some sort of cross-contamination or protein source that shouldn't have been there. A couple of other reasons why I tend to work with the veterinary commercial-based diets is because ingredients such as essential fatty acids, they make sure that they haven't been oxidized. They double-check them, make sure that the integrity is there, and so we've got diets that are delivering actually what's listed on the ingredient list, and they're in their active form. They also make sure that there's no contamination with toxins like mycotoxin. Remember, that's one of the ways that you can actually develop an adverse food reaction is by having some of these mycotoxins within the diet. And so the companies make sure there's no evidence of that in the diets, even before it makes it into the plant itself. And then as far as the quality assurance is concerned, these diets that are the veterinary commercial-based diets, they're produced in a very short-dated fashion in the sense that they are produced on demand. Basically, they're not sitting in a warehouse, they're not being degraded as far as its biologic activity is concerned, so they're coming out as the veterinary community demands it. So for that reason, that's for our pets, that's one of the greatest reasons for me to have a fresh, tasty diet that's been preserved and packaged in an appropriate packaging mechanism.